Hey everyone, this is Bill Krieger from the Veterans Archives podcast, where we preserve and share the incredible stories of our nation's heroes. Catch us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio, or stream anytime on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Really, anywhere you choose to get your podcast, you should be able to find us. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on social media to help us reach more veterans and supporters. We are a nonprofit, and this service is completely free for veterans. Every story matters, and every voice deserves to be heard. Spread the word, honor our heroes, and join us on this mission. Follow, share, and tune in, because their story should never be forgotten. Learn more at veteransarchives.org. We'll see you there. Today is Monday, June 9th, 2025. We're talking with Michael Spayde, who served the United States Navy. So welcome, Michael.
Thanks.
All right. Good to see you again. It's been a little bit of time.
It has been.
I think it was like the snow was blowing or something when the last time we talked.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Anyway, been a while. So let's just start out, kind of simple. When and where were you born?
Youngstown, Ohio.
Okay.
And I was born August 5th, 1970.
Okay. So you're a 70s, 80s kid.
Gen X. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So did you grow up in Youngstown?
No, we actually moved when I was in second grade, I think. We moved to Terre Haute, Indiana.
Okay. And what precipitated the move?
Dad's job.
Yeah.
So he was in aluminum, in aluminum manufacturing.
Okay.
In Terre Haute.
Okay.
And from there, he was in steel in Youngstown, and then aluminum in Terre Haute.
Okay.
And then from there, the aluminum plant shut down as well. So
yeah, this was kind of a point in time for our country where those industries are really struggling.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about what it was like to grow up in Terre Haute then.
Redneck kid.
Yeah.
Just with all my buddies. The school's actually pretty big, Terre Haute North. We had about 800 in our 800 graduating class. I think we started with 12.
Okay.
So it was a pretty big class, but we were country kids.
Yeah. Did you like go through school with like all the same people pretty much?
Yes.
So
yeah.
Your friends like from third grade on were your friends?
For the most part, yes.
Okay. Do you have any brothers and sisters?
Sister 3 years younger.
Okay.
We don't really keep in contact.
Yeah.
So just don't keep in contact.
Okay. Well, I won't ask about that then. How about that?
That'll work.
So what can you tell me about your parents? So your dad worked in the steel industry and then the aluminum industry.
Yep. Both my parents are still around.
Okay.
Still kicking. My dad worked in the steel industry, then aluminum industry. And then he went from there to service, physical plant manager for schools.
Oh, okay.
And he went from, I think, Saginaw Valley State, and then he moved to East Lake, Ohio. So Cleveland area.
Uh-huh.
So, and then from there he retired. So they're snowbirds now.
Yeah. Yeah. So do they still like have a place up here in the north somewhere?
There is that they have a house in Willoughby. Condo, 3-story condo, and neither of them can go up or downstairs very well anymore. So I'm thinking this might be the last year they're probably going to sell it.
Yeah. Probably looking for a ranch style something or other.
I'm trying to talk them into, hey, why don't you guys come up here and, just rent a house somewhere between here and Saginaw, which is where my sister lives.
Yeah.
Halfway in between. Why not?
Yeah. That'd be perfect.
I mean, they're only up here for 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
So
I have a lot of neighbors that are like that. I don't see them until like May.
Yep. Snowbirds.
Yep. They're gone until whenever. Yep. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about school. I want to back up just a tiny bit.
School.
Yeah. What was that like going through school? And it's the 70s. And, I think I joke with everyone, like we drank out of the hose. We stayed out till whenever. Was that what it was like for you?
It was exactly like that. So I can still taste the rubber from the hose. Every time I'm watering my garden right now.
Uh-huh.
And I turn that hose on. I'm like, ugh, I still remember the taste.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
We drank a lot of hose water.
Uh-huh.
Stayed out until dark. When the lights came on, we needed to be home.
Right.
Rode, I don't know, kids, country kids. I rode my bike everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We had BB gun wars, potato bazooka wars.
Yeah.
We did all the stupid things that we did. We rode bikes without helmets, and, I'm sure my parents drank when they were pregnant with me, and, yeah, it turned out pretty okay, I think.
Yeah. It's funny. You talk about the BB gun fights, and some people look at you like, what? So did you guys do this? So I remember I just had a Daisy Red Ryder BB gun,
Sure.
right?
Had one of those. Yep.
But then you always had that kid that had the one that you pumped up 20 times.
One pump only.
Yes. Okay. So you guys had the rule.
One pump only.
Yep. I remember those days.
I got Carl in my sight. Pump. One more pump.
Just to make sure.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
It was dang it. That was more than one, man.
That's not fair. So when you say you were a country kid, did you live out in the country then? Is that?
We actually, it was a neighborhood, just a small, neighborhood that was in the middle of the country. I mean, I think it was probably a cornfield at one point.
Right.
And we were surrounded by cornfields. So it's kind of, I guess I've lived my life that way the whole time.
Yeah.
From there, I moved out and went to college, did that thing. And, my first house with my first wife was literally a neighborhood in the middle of a cornfield. That's what Potterville is.
Right. Exactly.
And then from there, Sunfield.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Sunfield is. It's a big
a
neighborhood in the middle of a cornfield.
Oh, exactly.
And now I'm in Leslie.
Lots of corn.
It's a neighborhood in the middle of a cornfield. So
yeah,
that's me.
Yeah. So what did you go to college to do?
I went to college initially to be a nurse.
Okay.
I went to Purdue. It was a lot of fun, most of which I don't remember, unfortunately.
That would explain why you're not a nurse.
That would explain why I'm not a nurse. And I realized that I don't really care for blood that much.
Yeah.
So that wrapped up. That was a whole year. Moved back in with my parents, got my stuff straight.
Yeah.
And then went to Kalamazoo, went to Western for a little while.
Okay.
Decided to continue partying. Got my act together again and finished up at Davenport. That was my first degree.
Okay.
And went to work. I was in the civilian world, different office type jobs. So ended up in HR.
Okay. And so how did the Navy fit into all this?
My parents talked me out of joining the Marine Corps out of high school.
Okay.
I listened to them. Was it a good thing or a bad thing? I don't, it wouldn't have turned out the same.
Right.
I mean, I wasn't ready. I don't think I grew up until I was 25, 26. I mean, really. And I mean, when I was 28, I decided to when I was 28, I was between jobs because SM&P,
right.
We talked about that a little bit earlier, but they moved me to Naperville and didn't offer enough to make it worth the move.
Yeah.
So at that time I was unemployed. I had applied to a human resources position that happened to be a blind ad from the Navy Reserves. And got a phone call from my recruiter, Matt Wright, NC1. And he said, why don't you come down, talk to me? Okie dokie. And talked to him a little bit and decided that, now I had a chance. It was just the reserves. Had a chance to join and, maybe do something that I missed doing when I was 18. I did. So I was a reservist for, about 2 years.
Okay.
And my recruiter called me up and said, hey, we need a recruiter. Hey, that's kind of what I do. And so interviewed and took a 2-year contract.
Okay.
As a canvasser recruiter, that's what they called it, CanRec. And loved it.
So a lot of guys I talked to, myself included, we all joined the military pretty early in life. But there was always that one or two dudes at boot camp that were
31 years old.
Super old. They were so old. So
actually, no, I was in boot camp in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was 32 years old.
Yeah.
So in boot camp.
Yeah.
I was grandpa.
Okay. Yeah. Now I went to OCS when I was 38. So I get it, because you got to keep up with the young guys.
Sure.
But so what was your experience like? I mean, you've been on your own. You went to college, got your degree, did some partying, got married. You pretty much got your life going. You've had a regular job, and now you're at boot camp. What was that all? What was that like?
It was interesting. I know how to fold my underwear. Yes. I knew how to, tuck my socks together and, put them together in my drawers. It was interesting. I guess I approached boot camp from a different perspective, from a 10,000 foot perspective.
Yeah.
I knew the purpose of boot camp. It was to break you down as an individual, build you back up as the team. I get it. I got it from day one. I knew that's what was going to happen going into it.
Right.
About day 3, I still said, what the hell did I do? And my locker was perfect every single time, and it got tossed every single time.
Yeah.
But I knew what the purpose was.
Right. You had to play the game.
Had to play the game. And that's what it was. It was a game. I helped everybody that I could, all the kids, because they were like everybody else. So it was, it was an interesting time in my life.
Yeah.
Interesting time.
Well, and I think too, that probably you're questioning your own judgment for those few days is probably a different type of questioning your own judgment than I did when I went in at 19 or 18, right? Like I questioned my own judgment because I hadn't had any experience yet.
Sure.
But you had, but still it's refreshing to know that even the old guys, questioned whether they're not, they should have done it.
I
think that's universal.
I think that's universal. I think everybody, what did I know when I was 18?
Yeah. I
didn't know anything. Looking back at that, I was partying, girls.
Yeah.
That's pretty much my life from 18 to, 28.
Uh-huh. Now, were you married at the time you went to?
I was.
To boot camp. Okay.
My first wife.
All right. And you, so you go to basic training, and then did you go to like Pensacola for recruiting school?
I did.
I was a recruiter, so
okay.
I loved Pensacola.
Pensacola is an awesome place. I enjoyed my time there every single time. Yes. I went back for classifier school, so another 4 weeks down there. A couple of different recruiter awards was presented down there to me. I loved being down there. It was an awesome base. You literally didn't have to go anywhere,
right?
Except for the sushi place outside the back gate. I can't remember the name of it, but the Blue Angel rolls were awesome. I think it was soft shell crab. And then Pensacola Beach, of course.
Right. And there was all the bars down there too. I was there in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
And 2 things stick out in my mind. Well, actually 3 things. One, it was hands down probably one of the best assignments ever. It was great to be there. But 2 things happened when I was there. One is that I ate barbecue from the Exchange.
Okay.
And got sick. I ate like on a Friday, and I thought I was going to die all weekend. Like I wondered what I had done in a previous life to make this happen to me. And because I got started getting sick at a bar, and I'm not a big drinker, so it wasn't like I was drinking. It was this. Yeah. So that happened. And then the other thing that happened, remember you going to recruiting school and you had to like do like speeches and things like that. You had to get up in front of your class and they critiqued you. Right.
Yeah.
So I got up in front of the class and I do my little speech, and all I remember is one guy wrote on his critique, how many times is this guy going to check his fly to make sure it's zipped? Because I must have been checking my fly every 2 seconds, I guess.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, that was my recruiting school experience.
And what I remember, we had a couple of guys when I was in recruiting school that were over height and weight standards. Put it that way. Myself included. I never made height or weight. I had to make tape.
Yeah.
I made tape. That's just, what I did. And I remember having a PT as a group, all of us, because of these couple of guys. And again, I knew the purpose. It was a team effort. And military, it's just what we did.
Yeah.
And so we PT'd twice as long as we had to, every single day, 7 days a week. I think it was 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I didn't experience any of that. I was fit back in the day.
Sure.
Fortunately, I guess so was everyone else in that class. So now, did you have kids at this time?
I have no biologicals.
Okay. All right. So you get done, you come back home and you start recruiting. Talk to me about what was that like for you?
Oh, it was interesting. Started recruiting as, when did I start? I started recruiting, I think I want to say February of 2004.
Okay.
That's when I started. I was at the Reserve Center in Lansing, Saginaw and Marshall Street, I think.
Yeah, right there at the corner.
Yep, the Quonset hut.
Yep.
It's a National Guard recruiting office now. It used to be the Naval Reserve Center for Lansing.
Yeah, and at one time, because I grew up down the street from there, at one time it was like a Marine Corps.
Yeah, it was Navy and Marine Corps.
Yeah, okay.
Because the Marines were there full time. We had Navy staff full time. Hung out with the Marines. way better than the Navy staff. I had a lot of fun. Matter of fact, I just reconnected with the supply sergeant that retired back in 2009.
Yeah.
He was a supply sergeant at the Reserve Center, a guy that I hung out with regularly.
How cool is that?
And it was a, in my work today, I just, blind email contact. And he calls me and he's like, "Hey," I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, asked me who I was, asked me my name. He's like, "Did you by any chance work at the Reserve Center?" I said, "Yes, matter of fact, I did, from 2004 to 2000, I actually had to move to the recruiting office on the south side, but it was the same guy. And so we reconnected. He needed some help with the work that I do now. And we ended up meeting at the gun range. So I figured, Marine, I need to shoot. Maybe he still shoots. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I got 2 new ones. I got to try them out." Like, perfect timing.
Awesome.
So we met up there. We had actually middle of the afternoon. We were there by ourselves. It was probably a 2-hour conversation. Get reacquainted.
Did you find though that like it was just easy? Like I run into guys I haven't seen in 10 years and it's like, just pick up where you left off.
There's nothing. We just go.
Yeah.
And it seems like that with almost everybody I deal with. And my work is veterans. So, and it's easy to talk to people. There's no icebreakers. It's like, you got, have a hat on or, a shirt or, it's just, I go have a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, regardless of what branch of service, we kind of all speak the same language.
Doesn't matter. I think at this point, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We all went through the same thing. It doesn't matter what branch you were in. We all got broke down. We all got built up. And again, hindsight looking back, it's at least for the Navy. And I assume it's the same with all the branches, but it's, as you progress through the ranks, you are required to be a leader.
Yeah.
That's, you're required to be a leader. And in my work today, what I find is the folks who got out early are the ones who have the most problems.
Yeah. In
their careers, in their career path.
Well, if you think about it too, so we're going to talk about what you do today, but, we'll put a pin in that, but the statistics are pretty crazy that like 50% of the people who get out of the military leave their first job within the first year.
I would agree.
And then 75% total leave before the second year because it's not the civilian world is not the same as military.
I agree.
And especially if you got out after not serving a whole lot of time.
Sure.
Right. Because I don't think you had that time to develop as a leader. So you're kind of,
you're still, again, just an observation from, a guy that's been there and done that.
Yeah.
In the Navy, you really don't get into a leadership position until you're an E4, the officer 3rd class. Then you might have, a little workstation, a couple of people. But from there, it just progresses.
Right.
It progresses through your career, and however long you serve, by the time you get out, you've had all of the experience that you need to be successful. And if you did it right, if you have, if you did it right, you're going to come out, you're going to be successful in the civilian world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you did the recruiting gig for a few years. Anything stick out in your mind about recruiting? Like, I mean, I've got a million stories. I'm not going to share mine because this is your story. But yeah, anything like stick out in your mind while you were doing recruiting? Do that you like when you think back? That's what you think about?
Oh, nothing in particular. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Looking back at it, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of heartache, a lot of hours, a lot of days, a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's just, just like different things. I lost one of my recruits, a female, because she was pregnant. She tested positive for a pregnancy test at MEPS. And I worked out of Lansing. So, I had Lansing MEPS. So there was never windshield time. It was like, oh, cool, man. Just drop her off,
right.
Hey, bud, hey, Uncle, grab your girl, drop her off, grab your guys. Hey, can you grab mine too? Since you're already doing this on Sunday, I'll take care of it next Sunday.
Yeah.
I couldn't even make it from the office to MEPS. My boss was on the phone. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she tested positive. This is your fault.
Yeah.
Excuse me? This is your fault. How's it my fault? Chief, how's it my fault? I didn't have sex with her.
Right.
It's your fault. You should have had to talk about birds and bees. That's fraternization, Chief. I would have gotten in trouble for that too.
Yeah. It's a catch.
Fix it.
It's a catch-22.
Fix it. How am I going to fix it? That's one of the memories.
Right.
Just things like that. Just, different recruits. Got a pair of brothers from Holt area. Still in contact with their mother. Both are doing well. I've had several individual. I guess we're moving into work. So
yeah. So you got out. So were you still married at this time then? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you stayed married right up through the time you got out of the Navy.
Just before. So
okay.
With my second wife.
Okay.
So I had two wives during my 20 years, 10 years each.
Okay.
So I've been married for 20 years.
Starter wives.
Yeah. Times two.
Something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. We won't go there. Okay. So you get out and what do you do?
I work with veterans doing career services. So anything employment related, that's what I do for veterans.
Okay.
My specialty, what I really enjoy is professional profiles. So give me your resume. Let's get it working.
So do you help demilitarize it?
No, I don't want to do that. That's not my mission.
Okay.
My mission is to get you a job.
Okay.
My mission is to not, let me rephrase. My mission is to do everything I can to help you get your own job.
Right.
So I don't have jobs to give to people, but I get them prepared to get there themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So every tool that I have available is in their toolbox now.
Okay. All right. And this is Operation Job Ready Veteran?
That is correct. Yep. Based out of Indianapolis. We're actually 16 people now. All veterans.
Mm-hmm.
And, all veterans except one spouse, veteran spouse or Army spouse.
Okay.
So active duty Army spouse. So, but yeah,
all right.
It's a great organization.
How long have you been doing this?
Started January 22nd, 23.
Okay.
Oh, 24. I'm sorry, 24. So my retirement date for the Navy was February 29th.
Mm-hmm.
I was on terminal leave. And my goal was, when I started the retirement process, my goal was to have a job working before I actually got off the rolls for the Navy.
Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think that your time looking for a job after getting out of the Navy helped you in how you work with people now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's fresh. It's right there.
Yeah.
My attitude coming from recruiting, been doing this stuff for 25 years. It's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
I get me a job right now. That was the attitude. I mean, I started in 6 months out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was September 1st is when I started, my career search for what am I going to do next?
Right.
It was uncertain. I didn't know, I'm 6 months out and my background's HR. I can't approach a civilian employer 6 months out.
Right.
I can't. It doesn't make sense. So I just started looking for state jobs. I figured state jobs, it's going to take at least 3 or 4 months, and then, if transparency, my retirement date is here, everything should be fine. 18 interviews with the state of Michigan.
Wow.
18 interviews, 18 denial letters.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was an attitude check. I went back and looked. I talked to some friends, very good friends, that are in the HR industry.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my closest friends, her name's Ellen. She's like, that interview you went on, did you own the room when you walked in? Of course I did. That's what I do. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Just, I forgot about it. It was check the attitude. You don't run the room. You answer the questions.
Right.
And you do, you be honest, be transparent. My job search was very, very restrictive because of things that I wanted or didn't want.
Yeah.
I've been driving, for for my professional career, I've been driving to and from work hours of driving. I didn't want to drive more than 10 miles. Well, living in Leslie, I mean, Lansing,
right,
Jackson,
yeah,
no more than that type of a commute.
Yeah, you don't want to be in Livonia or Grand Rapids or someplace like that.
No, been there, done that.
Yeah.
I actually, at one point in my career, I lived in Potterville and I drove to St. Joe. I worked at Whirlpool for Manpower, and that was 107 miles one way, 365 days I did it.
Wow.
And it worked. I got an offer from one of my contractors. So that was .com. So that was .com boom and unfortunately bust.
Right. Yeah, what goes up must come down.
You got it. We never had a product.
Right.
It was always, getting the money, getting the cash, and hiring new people to do something. And we just didn't have a product.
Right. As close to a Ponzi scheme as you can get without being illegal.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can sell an idea.
Yes, you can.
And as a former recruiter, you probably knew. I mean, when you're recruiting, you are selling an idea. You're right. I mean, it's not a tangible product.
We're going to go into a whole thing at this point, I think, with that question.
Okay.
When I decided to leave SM&P because again, we discussed it, but the moving to Naperville wasn't an option for us. Was looking for a new job. It was frustrating. I was a recruiter. I was an HR, an HR generalist basically for SM&P.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of job I was looking for. And I had an interview. I think it was with Career Builder, as a matter of fact. I don't think they're around anymore, but it was a career, like monster.com.
Yeah. Monster or what is it? There's a bunch of them out there.
There are a bunch of them now.
Indeed. All those places.
But the interview was for a salesman position. And I didn't realize that when I went, and quickly realized that's what I was interviewing for during the interview. I went home and I was bummed out. It's like, it's already been months that I've been unemployed again by my choice.
Yeah.
And talking to my wife, my ex, and she sat me down and she's like, "Look, dude, you are a salesman. That is what you do." And it was literally an epiphany. It was like, holy cow, that is my life. That's what I do. I didn't like it because in my head, I was an HR guy.
Yeah.
I embraced it. And I mean, at this point, I try not to sell because that's my entire everything.
Right.
It's part of who I am, and the sense of urgency, my sense of urgency stresses me out. It stresses me out sometimes.
Stresses other people out too, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
And again, that's, the recruiters in the current work that I do, I've spoke with many recruiters, very similar backgrounds, or just, that was their last duty station, or career recruiters. And it's one of the things I ask them, like, how, were you successful as a recruiter? Because, recruiting is, it's a tough gig.
Yeah.
It's not the job for most people. It's just a 3-year tour. I think at least for the Navy, it was a 3-year tour. I had more trouble with employees than success with employees. And it wasn't a leadership issue. It was, they're not cut out for this job, and you can't hire them. You can't fire them. You just have to deal with them.
Right.
And try to do the best you can with what you have. We figured out how to do it. But it was tough. It was tough, and the realization that, I'm a salesman, that's my profession. I can put any kind of word on an HR guy, right? I can put that on there.
Yeah.
But I'm still selling a company. The Navy, as a recruiter, you sell, as any branch. I mean, you're trying to sell to a 17, 18-year-old kid a concept that most people in today's world have never even heard of from their family.
Yeah. or
they have no idea,
or their guidance counselor, or whoever.
Right. And with the guidance counselors, they didn't want military. They wanted everybody to go to college.
That's how they got scored.
That's how they got scored. It was, dealing with, my entire career in the Navy has been millennials and Zs.
Yeah.
And they just didn't have, generally, they just didn't have the wherewithal to figure out, you got to do something.
Yeah.
What do you flip burgers all your life? This is what we offer. This is how we can help. This is what we do. You can pick any job that's in the civilian world. I can tell you the job equivalent in the United States Navy. And it's the same job. Exactly the same. Recruiting is recruiting. Cranking a wrench on a diesel engine, it's called an engine.
Right.
And out there, it's called a diesel mechanic. And if you play your cards right, you can get your ACE, you can get your certification paid for by the Navy and walk out with a job in 2 weeks, making $60-70 an hour, or the trades, any trade,
right?
Anything.
Well, and the catch was, though, you didn't know what was going to be available, or what they qualified for, right?
That is
so
correct.
You really had to walk that line about
don't sell a job,
selling a job, right?
Don't sell a job. It's, back, you said you were recruiting in what the early 90s.
Yeah.
That's still, in the early 90s, what did they call the recruiting manual?
I couldn't even tell you.
When I joined and started recruiting, at some point on our, third or fourth revision of our recruiting manual, my boss told me, I don't know if it's true or not. I didn't, I just thought it was funny. The recruiting manual used to be called the Arts and Crafts of Recruiting.
Probably was.
And that is one of the, you asked about memories. That was one of my memories, the arts and crafts of recruiting. All the arts and crafts that we did.
Yeah.
There was a lot.
I'm not going to lie. Like, I didn't even look at the recruiting manual.
Well, no, to take the tests.
Yeah.
In recruiting school, but
right.
Running the station every now and again, I did have to look things up.
Yeah.
Look up stuff. Just as a reference. But the arts and crafts of recruiting, it's one of the memories that will always stick out for me.
Got to find that book on eBay.
So true. We did lots of arts. We did lots of crafts, lots of talking, babysitting.
Yeah. Did you find that, so I recruited right outside of Central Michigan, and lots of kids would stop in.
Sure.
Right. Lots of them. And what I found was I kind of played the long game. Like, you got to play the short game because it's always about what did you do lately.
Yes.
Right. Just like you might have recruited 7 people, but you had that one person who showed up pregnant.
Yep.
And now you're down one person, and they don't care what you do.
You're a shitbag.
Yeah. Yeah.
You put 6 people in. It's the 15th of the month. You lose one.
Yeah.
And you're a shitbag.
Yeah. Exactly.
So you start over.
Master Chief's tapping on your desk, and the whole 9 yards. So yeah, it's a very weird.
It's
a weird world to be in.
It is.
But it's, if you look at people who are in sales, car sales, insurance sales, whatever, it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You sold 20 cars last week.
Right.
How many did you sell this week? We don't care about this.
Right.
Because that's all money in the bank now. But yeah, I would play the long game. And what I was getting at was, and I wonder if you did this too, I would talk to these guys, I would be nice to them because I knew that there was probably 50% of them are going to be back.
Sure.
Right. Because they've all been sold on college. And college is a great place. I got my degree. But it is not for everyone when they're 18.
I agree.
And just like the military is not for everyone when they're 18, there should be a balance. But these kids are sold on it. They get to college and oh my God, I can't do this, which is what I did. And then they come back. And then at that point, it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Sure. Because
they're ready. You don't have to sell them anymore because they're ready to go.
Have a seat.
Yeah. Did you ever get that? That one kid who spent all of his dad's money not on college and he had to go somewhere really quick.
Yep, I did. Quick ships.
Yep.
I need to get out of here. Why?
My dad's going to kill me.
Why do you have to get out of here?
Right.
What also got me a lot in recruiting was people just didn't believe you.
Yeah.
When you said or asked the question, when's the last time you smoked? Nope. When's the last time you were arrested? 2 questions. You realize we're going to do a drug test. You can't beat it.
Right.
You can't beat it. I don't care what you did. I need 30 days clean. You got it. Got it. You sure? Got it. Next day, your guy popped positive.
Clearly he didn't get it.
Or, the next day, hey, you guys got an FBI hit. You need to get it fixed.
Yeah.
So an FBI hit is there's a criminal record of some sort somewhere.
Yeah.
They've had their fingerprints taken. In the way that we introduce this to our candidates, again, you can't beat this drug test. If you used it, it will be there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, listeners, we need your help to keep the Veterans Archives podcast going. We're a nonprofit dedicated to preserving the stories of our nation's heroes, and we provide this service completely free to veterans. Your support helps us record, share, and archive these incredible stories so future generations never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. Every donation, big or small, makes a difference. Visit veteransarchives.org to contribute today. Help us honor their service by ensuring their voices are heard. And thank you for your support, and thank you to all the veterans who have served our country.
Did you ever have your fingerprints taken? Ever? Not as a kid, like for, missing persons,
right?
But as from a police department. Have you ever had your fingerprints taken? No. All right, cool. You sure? Yep. Cool. Yeah, I had an FBI hit.
Yeah.
So when that happens, you have to fix it. Can it be fixed? Can you get a waiver for it? Or is it not waiverable that month?
Right.
Our waivers.
Is this a felony or is this a misdemeanor?
Right, even sometimes a felony we could work with.
Right.
Every now and again. Sometimes not. Sometimes yes. So it's really, those were used. I think those requirements, they were used to up the applicants or reduce the applicant level.
Yeah, like a throttle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly correct.
Yep. And did you so we had this really crazy rule, like if you smoked dope like once or twice, that's cool. But if you like smoked it 5 times in your lifetime, you were an addict and you couldn't join.
They upped the usage.
Oh.
They called it 10.
Oh, okay.
In my time.
So it was the magic number.
Up to 10 times, you can get a waiver from the CO.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't have to go anywhere. Well, just to our HQ.
Right.
From 11 to 100, I think it went to our regional.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think over 100, like 101, it actually had to go to the admiral of CNRC. So Commander Navy Recruiting Command.
Right.
Somebody admits, it's like, okay, how many times? I don't know. You got to have a number, brother.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a number. Give me any number. You tell me. And I usually preface that with, if it's any more than 10, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
So how many times did you smoke it? 9 times. Roger that. Make sure you keep that number in mind.
Right.
Because you're going to be asked 12 more times today.
Yeah, don't say 15 or 20 later on or 100.
Right.
That'll
or
be
I don't remember.
Right.
Pick a number and stick with the number.
Well, and that was something else too is, 2 things really. One is that as a recruiter, I know a lot of them did, but as a recruiter, you can never lie to an applicant.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Correct.
Now, I would preface that with, I'm not going to answer questions you didn't ask, right? But anything you ask me, I'm going to tell you the truth.
Yep. Exactly.
And if you decide not to join because I told you the truth, that's fine. Because I'd rather do that than have you come back and tell all your friends I'm a liar, because now I'm done.
Now you're a dirtbag.
Yeah.
Like referrals in this business, in sales, I think in any kind of a sales, career, referrals are money.
Mm-hmm.
You piss one person off, they're going, it's just like the bad, that restaurant, you have a bad experience, you're going to tell 10 people.
Yeah.
If you have a good experience, you might tell one, maybe.
Right.
And those referrals are that's money. That's how our life was made easier. Somebody told somebody that they had a good experience and that person comes.
Yeah. Especially if they come like right home from boot camp
mm-hmm.
and bring their friends in. That's like gold.
It's gold.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because they're like fresh from boot camp and they're not complaining and
they're all Navy and they're all, all patriotic. And it's awesome.
Yeah. Michael told me everything. There was no surprises when I got there.
It's funny that you mentioned that, that tactic,
uh-huh.
Because I did the same thing. I honestly, I don't think I lied to anybody.
Yeah.
I tried not to. I never, I've never been on a ship. So, it's something that I've never admitted to. Nope, never been on a ship. But, redirect.
Yeah.
Redirect that way.
It is the Navy.
And if
we have ships.
Exactly. You're going to go on a ship more than likely.
Right.
Unless you're my buddy from Eaton Rapids who wanted to be on a ship. His whole reason for being on joining the Navy was being on a ship. He was in our delayed entry program for a long time. He was one of the good ones.
Yeah.
But he chose aviation, which you should still be able to
get on a ship. Go to a carrier or something.
But his platform were the AWACS. They don't land on ships.
No, they do not.
And he came back, I think, after his A school. He's like, man, you guys killed me. It was my buddy's recruit. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? It's like, you never told me I'd never be on a ship. What do you mean? I picked this platform and I can't ever go on a ship. I'm like, dude, you picked the platform yourself.
Yeah. We didn't
do any research. It was a joke.
Yeah.
He wasn't upset about it. It was just,
right.
It's like, I just didn't realize it. And he ended up getting out, moved to Colorado. I think he's a firefighter out there now.
Yeah.
So
it's a great example of you don't know what you don't know, right? Like you get in and you start picking these different schools or different things to do. And sometimes it works out great. And sometimes it's just a suck fest.
Yep. Exactly correct.
Yeah.
So I've had 9 people come back through the years that 8 of those 9 people, had good things to say.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. It was a thank you. You took care of it. One of those 9 people brought their son back after college, and I ended up putting that person in as an officer candidate.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. People that I've worked with in the civilian world, that I stayed in contact with, brought me their kids. That's what not lying and being that recruiter can do for you.
Yeah.
And then after the fact, it was always, I introduced myself, as Michael Spayde, I'm, retired Navy recruiter. Yeah, that guy. So it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say this too. Like if you're listening to this and someone tells you, oh, all recruiters are liars or whatever it is, dig into that story a little bit.
Oh, sure.
Because 9 times out of 10, there's a lot more to the story than what that person's telling you.
There is.
Yeah.
There is the one person that came back. Can't remember his name, but I remember he actually came to MEPS. I was working at MEPS at the time. I was a job classifier. And he came and, he came into the office. It was before, all the security protocols that they have in place now. He came in, he had pinpoint pupils, and it's like, dude, how many Norcos did you take today? Or something.
Right.
That's first thought that came to my mind. So how many Norcos did you take today? Brief conversation. It's like, yeah, the Navy screwed me. I'm like, oh, really? How? Well, my doctor got me hooked on these Norcos. Navy doctor? Really? Okay. I've had a lot of Navy doctors in my life. I got a Flexerol and a Naprosyn.
Right.
Nothing more than a Flexerol and Naprosyn. Here you go. You'll be fine.
If you're in the Army, you got ibuprofen.
Naprosyn on my side.
Yeah.
But so digging into that story, yes, there was obviously something going on there.
Yeah.
And I would agree. Bad experiences. I hear about it still today. Had a bad experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You have bad experiences in the civilian world too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have terrible employers and you have terrible bosses, and
absolutely,
it's going to happen no matter where you go.
Right. It's called life.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, the great thing about being in the military was you had a job. Like you were guaranteed a job.
You have a job that you can't get fired from unless fraternization,
right? Drugs,
DUI, or you punched your somewhat. You
had to do something
seriously messy.
Yeah.
We weren't at will, which is one of the most important items in my reasoning for joining and staying with the Navy. Every employer in the civilian world is at will for the most part.
Right.
What's at will employment? I can get fired for any reason or no reason at all.
If I don't like your shirt, or I don't like the way your glasses look,
Right.
or you're
Bye-bye.
done.
Have a nice day. That was the contract in the civilian world. The contract with us: do your job.
Yeah.
Don't do anything stupid. Do your job.
It's funny. When I got out of the military, I actually learned a lesson about the military from a guy who'd never been in the military. But what he told me was, I went into a sales job for a little while, and what he said was, do the things you know you need to do, and don't do the things you know you're not supposed to do, and you'll be successful.
I would agree.
I was like, that kind of sums up my military experience, right?
Exactly correct.
And if I go above and beyond, then the rewards are there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get overtime pay or anything like that. But
Chest candy.
Yeah.
I mean, ribbons and, awards and medals and, that's, again, from me, whatever, I had a secure opportunity,
right.
In the field that I was already, that was my field. It was human resources.
Yeah.
And I looked at it as I basically have a quarter of a century of work available to me today.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I have to do is do that job. Don't do anything stupid. It sounds easy. It was unbelievably difficult for so many people. Unbelievably difficult. And the only thing you had to do was don't do drugs. Don't drive while you're drinking. Keep your wiener in your pants.
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's it.
And don't talk back most of the time.
Right. That's all you got to do and not do.
Right.
Whether it's for 2 years or 22 years or 32 years, it doesn't matter.
Right.
That's what the military offers.
Well, and you make it through your enlistment, those simple lessons will make you successful
in the civilian world. Yes.
Right. Because so many people in civilian jobs just can't get it right.
Mm-hmm. Especially today.
Yeah. You bring in a military person. So this is something I ran into at Consumers Energy as the veterans program manager, was that I worked with veterans coming in because you have that veteran mindset and there's some things that you need to turn off.
Sure.
Right. But then also I worked with hiring managers because all those things that they hire you for, they get mad at you for too.
I agree.
Like if someone tells you to go do something, they better be clear because you're going to go do it.
Right.
And in the absence of orders, you're going to do it the way you think it should be done.
Exactly.
So don't get mad at me if you didn't tell me what you needed. And so that was some of the training that civilian supervisors needed was you bring in a military guy, gal, they're going to do what you ask them to do. Make sure you're asking for what you want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I agree.
Yeah. So it really kind of ties in with what you're doing now. And I want to go back to a question I asked before. I don't know that I asked it correctly when I said, so do you help demilitarize their resumes? And I think what I was asking was, when I got out, I'm like, oh, I was 95 Bravo and I was XYZ this and PDQ that. And people would look at that and they would just throw it in the trash bin because they didn't understand it.
Didn't understand it. So the answer to your question, now that I understand it, is yes, absolutely. I thought are you demilitarizing the veteran?
Oh God, no.
The answer is no.
No.
I like to think of it more as translations.
Yeah.
I'm not demilitarizing your resume. I want that employer to know you are a veteran.
Yeah. Absolutely.
100%. You are a veteran. First thing, your name, Navy veteran, or whatever. Secret, clearance, your clearance options, your Department of Defense clearance, your security clearances. Those are, items that are huge in the civilian world. Whether you still have it or you used to have it, it's huge. But it's a translation from what you did in the military into civilian terms. So people like me, in my position as an HR person at that company you're applying to, understands what you're trying to tell them.
Yeah.
Again, going back to helping civilians become sailors. My biggest sale, this is what I counted on. What do you want to do with your life? Yes, you want to party. Yeah, you want to get hitched. Yeah, yes, all that. What do you want to do with your life? Like when you're an adult, sometimes it was, like a career, you got to spell it out for them sometimes.
Right.
Most didn't really know. I mean, I know I couldn't have answered that question when I was 18. I did, I was going to be a nurse. Didn't quite work out.
I was going to say that turned out
like a polar opposite.
Yeah.
But that's something that, what are you going to do? Okay. So, and what did you do in the military? Mm-hmm. If I don't know, acronyms and, for the Army, I don't know, Marine Corps, it's pretty close, but the other branches of the service, I have to learn what you did, so I can translate it for you. So, you can work in the civilian world. So yes, that's something that I focus on.
Well, and do you find too, like, so this was something I think that people struggle with sometimes is that, I might have been a recruiter in the Navy as an example, but I was a first class petty officer. I was a chief, right? So I do have the HR background, but here's all the things, the leadership things that a chief did, or all the leadership things that a petty officer first class did.
Sure.
And sometimes employers don't understand that either. Right. I mean, if I retired as a colonel, right, you're not going to hire me as a vice president because I need to understand your business.
Sure.
But those leadership things that I learned as a colonel or a full bird captain or whatever it is
applies.
Yeah. Those count, right?
It applies.
Yeah. Just like if you're vice president, we're not going to bring you in the military, as the captain of a ship.
Right.
But we're going to know that you have the skill set to learn what we do and then eventually do that.
Sure.
And I think that sometimes that gets lost in translation as well. Is that something you work on?
It does. I've got several officers that retired officers, or, I was an officer in the military, officers. Their mindset's different. I was enlisted. I never had I had a degree when I came in. Wasn't my mission. I didn't want to go through all that, waivers, going through this and that and the other thing. And
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's just, I wanted to work.
Yeah.
My mindset is not, 10,000 foot looking down. It's meat and potatoes. That's my background. That's, when I was a kid, that was meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do. And that's what I wanted to do and continue doing. But officers are different. There's a different outlook, a different, I think, look on the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 10,000 it's a 10,000 foot overview. They're, again, generally,
right.
in general,
right.
Good, bad, different. It's just different.
Yeah.
Obviously dealt with a lot of officers in my years in the Navy. Most are pretty decent. I mean, I've had worse luck with chiefs than I had with most of the officers that I worked with.
They're a different breed.
That's a different breed too. But the translation for officers is a little more in depth than most enlisted folks.
Right.
Enlisted folks, here's a list, boom, here you go. I think a lot of what officers do, it's a lot of putting together a lot of theoretical information that would go on those, profile, on that resume. I don't think I explained that properly, but that's...
Well, I served 14 years enlisted, and then my last 7 years I was an officer. And I think the difference, if I boiled it down to my experience, was that when you're an officer, you're at the strategic level.
Yes.
And when you're enlisted, you're at the execution level.
Tactical.
Yeah. Yep. So if you were enlisted and then an officer, a lot of those strategic decisions you make are tempered by the fact that you had to execute those at some point.
Exactly correct.
Whereas if you were just an officer your whole career, you don't have the that knowledge of how this is going to impact. I won't say you don't. A lot of them don't have the understanding of how this impacts the boots on the ground.
The officers who were previous enlisted those were the good ones.
Yeah.
In my experience working for officers,
yeah,
those were the ones, they knew, especially in recruiting. I mean, recruiting it's just a tough business. It's all there is.
It's the toughest job you'll ever like, is what I tell people.
If you liked it or there's nothing in between.
Right.
You either love it or you hate it.
That's true.
There's nothing. It's all right. No, there's no.
There are no fence sitters.
Yeah. They're polar opposite.
Yeah.
You love it or you hate it. But those officers, even if they never served in a recruiting role, they understood. They understood that that Lansing station, South Lansing, it's over by Walmart now, but that station, the only Saturday we had off was the first Saturday of the month. That's it. We worked every other Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, that's what we did. 60 to 75, 80 hours a week. That's what we did. A lot of the guys that came from the fleet didn't realize that.
Yeah,
They
culture shock
didn't
for them.
realize, their detailer. Hey, you can get home, be with your family.
Yeah.
I can get you, your folks live in Traverse City. I can get you to Lansing. I can get you to Lansing right now as a recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. That's, there's,
You're never going to go to Traverse City though.
You're not going to be in Traverse City. It's full.
Yeah.
And then they sit down and they realize, oh my God, I'm working twice as what I used to do in my old job, and I don't understand anything. I have to learn an entirely new job.
Mm-hmm.
I have to learn an entire new way to live my life. And that didn't bode well for most people that came into recruiting.
And I think that's where there's a I'm going to call it a mistake, is that, I came from the fleet. I was a fire controlman, had no idea what I was getting into when I became a recruiter, but I loved it and I was good at it.
Sure.
I'm not bragging on myself, but I was good at it. I excelled at recruiting, I think, because I loved it. But a lot of guys, like you said, would come in and be like, holy crap, one, I'm not good at this.
I suck.
And there's no amount of training you're going to give that guy to make him good, because he's just not good at it.
Not a people person.
Right. We should give them the option to go back to the fleet or go do something else, but we force them to stay in recruiting, and they don't belong there. And that's the only thing I'll say about the military is, like, once you're there, you're kind of stuck, and hopefully it's a fit. Now, I didn't see a lot of people where whatever they did wasn't a fit, because I think they do a pretty good job of fitting people with jobs that match who they are. But recruiting is a whole different beast when it comes to
the opposite of that.
Yes.
It is. As station commander, I ran the station in Lansing from 4 to 9, 2004 to 2009. 1, 2, 3. I think I had 5 or 6 recruiters.
Mm-hmm.
I would say 3 of those recruiters were worth anything.
Yeah.
One of those recruiters was a negative in the office. Tried to get him reassigned several times. It wasn't an option. It wasn't a possibility.
Right. It was an incumbent on you to make sure he was successful.
Right. And how do I make him, if I've got, myself, 2 recruiters that are successful and one that is literally an anchor in making our job more difficult.
Yeah.
What do I do with this person? You are the driver. All you got to do, brother. Don't worry about it.
Take them there and pick them up.
Take them there and pick them up.
Yeah.
And then just give them one every month.
And don't talk to them.
Right. Don't talk to
For
them.
the love of God, don't talk to them.
So all I need you to do is drive these guys.
Yeah.
Pick them up, drive them to the motel, take them from MEPS, take them home. That's all you got to do. For that, you'll get 1 contract a month, every month. That's all you got to do. My guys were successful.
Yeah.
He got his 1 contract, which kept HQ off of his ass. All my guys made goal most months.
Right.
My guys made goal, and I was able to deal with that one issue, and then, you have mediocres, people who were, they're okay. They can at least, get one, most months.
Yeah.
You get 1 contract. So get 1 person in the Navy get that one. So it was difficult.
But see, that's where real leadership comes in, right? If I'm not a leader, I'm just going to try and force that round peg into that square hole every month, and it's just never going to fit. But as a leader, you were like, okay, this guy has a skill set. He can drive a car.
Sure.
Right? Let's let him drive a car.
This is a diesel mechanic, actually, but
yeah. You know what I mean?
He
like,
can drive a car.
He can drive a car. He can't talk to people, and we don't want him to do that.
Right.
But also, we don't, he's not going anywhere. So as a leader, you were able to kind of mix things up and get things done, and everyone was successful.
Everyone was successful.
Right? Even the guy who was an anchor. And the thing is, he probably wasn't an anchor because he wanted to be. Or was he?
He I don't think that was his initial.
Right.
I think at the end he was very frustrated.
Yeah.
It was difficult from a leadership standpoint. My office wasn't successful if I had a recruiter that didn't put somebody in the Navy.
Yeah.
If everybody puts somebody in the Navy, even if we don't make goal, if everybody puts somebody in the Navy, we're not getting in trouble. We still have Saturday off.
Yeah.
And our boss is, our chief is on somebody else's ass today. Because tomorrow is tomorrow and you haven't done anything for me tomorrow yet.
Right.
So yeah, it was, it's difficult. It was difficult. Learning experience. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I get that. So now you're working with Operation Job Ready Veteran. I can't say that enough because I really appreciate the work that you guys do.
Thank you.
If someone is either fresh out of the military and looking for some help, or someone who maybe has been out for a while and is just kind of floundering, how would they get in touch with you?
Website.
Okay.
I've plastered the mid-Michigan area with, everybody I know.
Right.
My business cards are out in town.
Okay.
That I hang out at places where I have, clients.
Yeah.
I'm proud of what I do. I mean, I tell everybody this, and I don't want people to take it the wrong way. I don't have a job. I just am doing what I do.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that for the last, I think over 18 months at this point. I'm getting a paycheck for it.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to pay me? Cool. So, I mean, it's not work. It's just, I get up, I know I've got, these certain things I got to do, for this, for this person or my ex-wife, I did 2 cover letters for last week.
Mm-hmm.
We still hang out, but anyway,
yeah, that's all right.
But she's an Army veteran, works at the prison in Ionia. She's, yes, we still hang out. Yes, we're still friends. We still share custody of our dogs. But the bottom line is, it boils down to the fact that she's a veteran and she's building her career with the state of Michigan. And I respect it.
Mm-hmm.
And I respect everybody that has went through what we went through, whether it be, whatever that veteran sitting across the table from me has went through. We've been through something similar.
Right. We all served,
and we don't have to break the ice. We just, have a seat and, even different branches of service.
Right.
We just sit down and start talking. I'm not a threat. I'm not asking you for money. I'm not asking employers for money. There's no cost. There's no cost.
Right.
Which we're funded by grants,
mm-hmm.
and whatever. But, I don't know. Yeah. This opportunity has clicked every single box that I made when I was retiring.
Mm-hmm.
Even a couple of boxes that I didn't know that I had.
Yeah.
I don't have to drive anywhere if I don't want to. My office is on the bottom floor of my house as well. I've got everything I need to do my job, which is a phone and a computer and me, my mouth. And that, I don't know. I get up in the morning and say, how many people I got today?
Right.
And I go through and, look at my notes or, if I've got to call people, if I got, make that initial conversation, that initial phone call, to try and figure out what their goals are, I'm going to help you get there. I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to give you everything that I have to help you get what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, whether you are, a 21-year-old kid just out of your first, 4-year tour or 2-year tour or how many years you did, or retired, been out of the Navy, been out of the military for, I've got a couple of clients who are over 70.
Yeah.
They don't need to work. One guy is working at, I think, Ryder, doing just warehousing stuff.
Uh-huh.
Why are you working? I ain't sitting around the house.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, okay, I'll help you. I'll help. You know, that's what I do.
So you, I love your story because it's a little bit different from most stories. Like most stories, it's school, military, it's this progression, and you kind of did it a little bit differently. But you've done a lot, really. I mean, you served your country, you brought people into the Navy, not only serving the military, but also serving those folks, because they're going to get something from all of that. And you're continuing to do that in what you do today, even after retirement from the Navy. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to cover?
Oh, the military is a fantastic option.
Mm-hmm.
It is a fantastic option. You can pick a branch and do pretty much exactly what you want to do, whatever that may be. You want to be a Marine? Cool. Be a Marine. You want to be in the Navy? Cool. What do you want to do? You want to be in the Air Force? Cool. What do you want to do? You're going to be in depth a long time. Coast Guard, good luck finding a recruiter, bro. So
Right.
It's an option. Just like the trades, just like college, you've got options.
Mm-hmm.
You make the choice to go military, and we've already talked about it. You're not going to get fired unless you do something stupid and do your job. If done properly, we can translate everything that you did in the military to civilian to make it look just like a job.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It was just a job.
Right.
Look at it, as your first job. 18-year-old kid, let me see your resume. My what? That's what the Navy's going to give to you.
Mm-hmm.
Or, whatever branch. You go into the Navy as a CBHT, hull tech, or not hull tech. Just say hull tech.
Yeah.
Sheet metal guy, right? Well, who does sheet metal in the civilian world? Well, plumbers.
Right.
HVAC guys.
Auto industry.
People
People who build boilers, people who build water heaters, people. Yeah. It's on and on and on.
Again, my career is career.
Right.
It's employment. That's what I do. That's what I've done my entire professional career. I live it. I love. That's just me. Every time I have somebody come into the house, a worker. The last one was plumbing guy.
Mm-hmm.
A kid, just maybe 23, 24, 25. Hey, how'd you get into this? Usually it's are you an apprentice, or are you still in apprenticeship?
Yeah.
This kid, yeah, I've got 3 years done. I've got one more year to go. He was 23. And I always, again, preface it, as civilian world, we don't talk about, wages, but I'm curious. 23 years old. You didn't go to college. Nope. How much you making? It's usually upwards of, apprenticeship, 25, 35 bucks an hour. Usually somewhere in there. 23 years old, no college. You're 1 year away from making 60, 70, 80 bucks an hour.
Right. In a union job.
You have a funded pension.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, that's a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is.
Listen to me. It is a wonderful, you know it too.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I open my eyes in the morning and I get a paycheck just because I open my eyes in the morning.
It's because you're breathing.
Yeah. It's liberating.
Yeah. Something I want to piggyback on the apprenticeship thing too. So here's something that a lot of people don't know. Let's say you go into the Navy on a 2-year hitch, right? You get out, you get into an apprenticeship. Guess what? You get GI Bill money for being in an apprenticeship.
Yes, you do.
So on top of the $30 an hour you're making, you're going to get
BAH for an E5.
You're going to get like $1,500 a month. Right. So,
and if you do it the right way, and you're not, I'm not, if you're one of those people who I'm not going to college.
Yeah.
Not my thing.
Yeah.
Cool. I love it. You do you. Give that GI Bill to your kids.
Yeah. That's available too.
If you do it right, each branch has different rules and regulations. When I married my second wife, she had a stepdaughter.
Mm-hmm.
So she had a daughter, my stepdaughter. That's one of the first things I did. Hey, I already have a degree. I already went and got another degree. Navy paid 400%. Bachelor's degree in psychology, 3.94 GPA, never paid a cent.
Yeah.
Not 1 cent. Paid for tuition assistance. All the books were covered. And I walk out with a degree. And I did it all at MEPS.
Right.
We had to be there. We didn't have 8 hours worth of work every day, but we couldn't leave. Go to school. Hey, that's a good idea. I'm going to go back to school. Navy paid for that. 100%.
Right.
And they will do it for the most part for anybody. Your duty station, your deployment schedule, it all affects it.
Right.
But it's there. It's available to you. $4,500 a year to go to school. Any school.
Yeah. And depending on what program you fall under and all that thing,
you can use your GI Bill if you want to while you're on active duty.
Yep.
I don't ever suggest doing that because it's a waste of a lot of money that's available. But it's there.
Right.
The entitlement. I hate that word.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it, especially in today's world.
Right.
Everybody thinks that they're entitled. Entitled to what? A good job, a house, the American dream. I'm entitled to the American dream. Shut up.
Right.
You're not entitled to anything except death and paying taxes, bro. Sit down, shut up. Now we have a conversation to have. Join the military and you do have entitlements just for doing your job.
Well, here's what I would argue is those VA programs and the GI Bill, those are not entitlements. Those are things that you earned for having served your country,
yes.
right? Like,
yes.
This isn't something you're just giving me to give me. I earned it.
That is true.
Like I served my however long. I get X number of dollars for my GI Bill. I got injured. I can't function properly.
Sure.
I get my VA benefits. Those aren't entitlements. Those are things that I earned as a veteran, and you earned them too.
I agree.
And I think that's where the differentiation has to happen, right?
Yep.
Those things are not entitlements. You take that off the table because those are earned benefits.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And that's one of the things too. Like when you're going to get me going, but when we go to war, Congress always calculates the cost of going to that war.
Sure.
And sending people over there. What they don't ever calculate is the cost of bringing them home.
Yes.
And once they get back, right? So all of a sudden now that's an entitlement. Well, no. Those people got hurt or earned those benefits or whatever it was doing what you asked them to do.
Sure.
Right. So, I really struggle with when people talk about those as entitlements and want to do something with them because look, we wrote a blank check when we signed up.
I agree.
Right. And that's whether you are a combat veteran or whether you're a non-combat veteran, whether you're a recruiter, every single job in the military helps the military be successful.
I agree.
And that's why I always ask people if they served, because many times if you ask them if they're a veteran, they're hesitant to say, yes, I'm a veteran, if they didn't serve in combat or they only served for 2 years or whatever it is.
Sure.
So I always ask, did you serve? Because to me, that's the important thing. If you served, did you serve for 1 year? Did you serve for 40 years? Whatever it is, everyone served, and it made our country successful no matter what your job was in the military.
I agree. Actually, that's a good idea because I usually ask, are you a veteran?
Right.
And I like, did you serve better? It's different.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to a lot of people, and, that because our requirements to be a veteran for Operation Job Ready veterans, less than what the state of Michigan requires. Less than, I don't need to talk about them, but, I can work with a lot of folks that the job folks at state of Michigan can't work. It's not in their wheelhouse.
Yeah, they got their left and right limits and they have to stay within.
Correct.
It's their rules.
I can pick up some folks that they can't help.
Yeah.
And I can send folks their way that they can help more than what I can help them. It's case management. I look at it as case management.
Well, and it's I think you probably learned some of that in recruiting too, right? Like Like I can't bring you in, but I know that branch is looking for what you got, right?
Recruiting, I want to leave this for, possible recruiters in the future, right?
Yeah.
Couple things. Number one, don't let your boss ruin your career.
Right.
Number one, because worst case scenario, you guys are together 3 years, probably less, overlapping.
Oh yeah.
Overlapping, duty stations. Don't ever let your boss ruin your career. Number two, this is probably the most important thing, and it applies to me today as well. Forget quota. Forget that word. Forget the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Just forget them, because they're there. They're never going away. You can't make that change. You can't change it. Help the people. Why is that kid in your office? Why is that kid in your office today?
Yeah.
Well, because mom and dad are going to kick him out when he turns 18 and he graduates. Awesome, mom and dad. Sweet. Good job. He needs a job. He might not know he needs a job. He needs to understand he needs a job. Help the person.
Right.
Numbers will come.
Yeah.
And every recruiter that ever worked for me, every person in recruiting that I've ever worked with, in officer recruiting, I get officers, brand new officers coming into the office. I was not a station commander for officer recruiting. I was just there.
Yeah.
I have chiefs come in. I have officers come in to do that job. I'm a career recruiter. I know how to do this job. It was my job to teach folks how to do this job. You got to let me. Don't be an officer today. Don't be a chief today. Be a student.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you how to do this. Is it the right way? I don't know. It works for me though. It's worked for me for, these years. So you got to forget about the numbers. Officer recruiting, a lot different, but enlisted recruiting, it's always numbers.
Right.
Forget about that stuff. Just help somebody. And on the flip side, I'm sorry, go back. As a recruiter, I took that to heart really early in my career because the numbers were killing me. The numbers were killing me.
Yeah.
I always woke up, I got to make, if you stop worrying about that and worry about the person that you're talking to, why is that person there? Obviously, like you don't go to a car lot without needing or wanting to buy a new car.
Right.
It's just a given. For the most part, everybody that comes into the office needed something. And if I couldn't help them for whatever reason, you still need something. You know what? I think the Army can help you here.
Yeah. I know a guy.
I know a guy. Come on, let's go. I'll introduce you. Or, hey, the Marine Corps. Marine Corps it's different. The Marines, you want to be a Marine.
Right.
It's not the same.
And you're not, and if they can't be in the Marines, they're not going to be anything.
Right.
That's what they want.
It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think recruiting is a lot. Back in my younger days, this is how I look at recruiting. It's a lot like when you go to the bar, right? You go to the bar, and if you're desperate to go home with someone that night,
you'll look like an idiot.
They can just smell the desperation on you, right?
Sure.
So if you're in recruiting and you haven't made your numbers and that's what you're concentrating on, that kid sitting in that chair knows that you don't have his best interest at heart.
Right. You're
just trying to make a number.
Right.
And they know it.
And that's where a lot of recruiters got in trouble too.
Yeah.
They cut corners. I've had asthma, I don't have asthma, but that's one of the, big ones I have.
Use an inhaler, ever have asthma. Yeah.
Oh, you stop using your inhaler. When you're like less than 12, right? Because I can still work with you.
Right.
Yeah. No. Okay. You stopped using you stopped when you were 12. Moving on.
Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah.
That's where recruiters get in trouble. They're hiding stuff.
You got to know when to move on.
They have to be ready, willing, and able.
Yeah. All three
at the same time.
Yes.
Or you have to be able to talk them into something. One of those three. Because they're never going to boot camp if they're not ready, willing, and able.
Right. Right. And there are some people who You just have to say, I'm sorry, you're not qualified.
Right.
And I think that people have trouble. You've gone all this way. You got this guy in the office, like you're one person away and they're just not qualified.
And the thing is, again, my first recruiter, or my recruiter, it's like, who was my first boss?
Mm-hmm.
Recruiting, by the way. It's like, you miss goal, you're going to get your weenie slapped.
Right.
You might have to, do some extra military training. You might have to come in on Saturday. You tell this guy not to talk about something in his medical record, you get caught, you're out.
Yeah, that's it.
You're either out of the Navy or you're out of recruiting. You're going to be in a bad position regardless. I've seen it happen multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
It's not worth it. It's a career. Even if you're not going to make it a career, it's what you're doing. You get kicked out after 5 years. You have this resume, and you got a bad conduct discharge or dishonorable or something. What happened in those 5 years? You only got two choices: hide it, talk about it, or lie about it.
Right.
If looking at a DD 214, if that's a requirement for the job, does that person does that civilian know how to read that DD 214? Do they know it was a bad conduct discharge?
Right.
You can give them the different copy. Give them copy 1. It's not on there. It just says you served. I don't want that copy, man. I need copy 4. I need to look at that RE code.
Right.
Because I know those RE codes.
Or I need to see your last
eval
DD 214 because I have like 4 DD 214s.
Right. Yeah. I've got a 214 and a 15. So they had a bunch of my awards were messy.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's
because I got out, went back in, and got out, went back
sure.
in. So yeah.
Sure.
So I mean, if there was a bad kind of a big chicken dinner in any one of those,
right.
I'm just going to grab the one that doesn't say it.
Exactly.
And maybe I'll get away with it. But
right.
yeah, so educating employers as to what to look for, But if someone's doing the right thing, you don't have to ever do that.
Exactly correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. You miss goal. I mean, how many times did I miss goal in 23 years?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're still
probably a dozen times.
Still sitting here today.
I still get a pension.
Right.
And I still have excellent evals.
Yeah.
Well, most excellent. I mean, if you miss goal and you just get like that miss goal eval, right?
Right.
It's hard to explain it. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's just part of the job.
To see that eval come back and like, I didn't write any of that, but that is really mediocre. It's a mediocre, it was meant to be that way.
Right. We know what this means.
We know that you were a shitbag that month or that particular fiscal
right.
year. But yeah, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of stuff. Drinking from a hose.
Yes.
Drinking from the fire hydrant. All those things. And you've already lived quite an interesting life, done a lot of stuff. But I think as we kind of wrap up our conversation today, you've said a couple of things already, but I really want to put a finer point on it. And that is, if someone is listening to this 100 years from now and neither one of us are here and they're listening to your story, listening about your life, the things that you've done, what message would you leave for that person? Like, what do you want them to take away from all of this?
The military has provided a life that I've always wanted today. Always. I don't have to work. Mm-hmm. I wake up in the morning and I get paid just because I open my eyes today. I've got a dream house. My home is exactly, with the VA loan, I walked in, I'm like, yep, this is it right here. Just make the offer. I'm done. We're not going anywhere else.
Yeah.
We're done. My resume, I'm in career services. My resume is, I am, the resume,
mm-hmm.
And that's, it's solid. I don't hope I never have to use it again, but if I need to, it's solid.
Right.
I used the Navy and I got everything out of it that I wanted. Navy got everything out of me that they needed. And they're moving on to the next.
Right.
My time in the Navy was 23 years, the best 23 years of my life. My stepdaughter got a free education with my GI Bill. No student loans. She's a nurse, and she makes more hourly rate than her mother and myself combined without overtime.
Mm-hmm.
She makes more. She's 23 years old. She's a nurse at U of M, emergency room. You know, what?
Yeah.
You know, I don't have a student loan for her. She doesn't have student loans. What's in the news? Everybody's got student loans. Thousands and thousands of dollars. Never going to pay them off.
Right.
You know, how many articles do I read? You know, student loan, 75 years old and still paying the student loan from when they were 18. She has nothing except a good job, and she loves it. I had a good job. I loved it. I have a good job now. Not really a job. It's just what I do.
Yeah.
You know, but all of the years of my entire professional career, all of the years I've heard, do something you love. You'll never work a day in your life. I was 54 years old before I realized what that really meant.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm living it every day. Every day.
That's awesome.
I'm not working. I'm just doing what I do.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, thanks for doing what you do this afternoon.
Appreciate it.
Talking with me and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
All right. Cool.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Veterans Archives podcast. We truly appreciate you taking the time to listen and honor the incredible stories of our nation's heroes. Don't forget, you can catch us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio, or stream past episodes anytime on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and as I've said before, any place you can find a podcast, you can find the Veterans Archives podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share our content on YouTube and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and across all social media. Every share helps us reach more people and preserve more stories. The Veterans Archives podcast is a nonprofit initiative, and our mission is simple: to give veterans a voice and ensure their stories are never forgotten. This service is completely free for veterans because their sacrifices deserve to be recognized and remembered. You want to help? Follow us, spread the word, and if you know a veteran with a story to tell, send them our way. Visit us at veteransarchives.org to learn more about how you can get involved. Thanks again for tuning in, and most importantly, thank you to all the veterans and their families for their service and sacrifice. Until next time, take care, and we will see you on the next episode of the Veterans Archives podcast.